Today, I'm going to present one of the most exciting topics so far than the other topics I have presented before. The reason is that this topic is current research. There are a lot of gaps which need to be filled in, which is calling upon research to be able to come forward and give us the answers on this topic. We are going to look at this topic, which is going to focus on Alexthymia and interception. And the main question is Alexthymia or interception the main causes of deficits in empathy in autism? So let's get on with the topic now. Our keywords today is going to look at autism spectrum disorder, Alexthymia, interoception, the sensory experiences, neural relating to the nerve or the nervous system. Have you ever wondered why some autistic people struggle to show empathy, or the need to make bowel or bladder movements, and put all this on autism? So, we have got some questions here which I put here today, and these questions are asking for answers. Some of these questions will be discussed on this presentation. The first question is atypical interception associated with autism spectrum disorder or Alexthymia, or whether each condition has an independent impact on interceptive ability? That is a research and a question discussed by Shah 2016. Do autistic people encounter abnormalities when perceiving and integrating physiological feedback from their bodies? And mainly is this to do with Alexthymia or interception again? And what is the precise nature of the relationship between interception deficits, alexthymic traits, and autism spectrum disorder? And should Alexthymia be regarded as a reflection of a general impairment in interception? And can co-occurring Alexthymia also explain the emotional symptoms seen in other psychiatric disorders? And these questions are going to be discussed on this presentation. And I say here future research. We really want to understand the cause of the dramatically increased incidence of severe Alexthymia in the autistic population, because that's what research and studies are showing us. So let's quickly define autism. Autism spectrum disorder from the American Psychiatric Association says it's a neurodevelopmental disorder diagnosed based on behavioral impairments in social communication and behavioral flexibility. And this, at cognitive level, autism spectrum disorder is characterized by difficulty with presenting others' mental states, which is the theory of mind, and with one's own mental state, metacognition. And if you want to understand more of theory of mind, I've done some presentation discussing theory of mind as well. So the brains of autistic people are challenged by structural and functional difficulties, demonstrating low or higher connectivity between different brain regions. And this definition is trying to link us with the way the brains are connected to the nervous system and how this brings in interoception how this brings in Alexithymia. So let's look at what is interoception. It is the perception of physiological feedback from the body and is associated with a range of cognitive, emotional, and affective functions. This is the perception of a wide range of physical states beyond emotions, including heart rate, respiratory effort, temperature, fatigue, hunger, thirst, satiety, muscle ache, pain, and itch. And you can see that interoception is covering a broad range of physical states here, starting from the heart rate. But it says beyond emotions, because this topic here, we are looking mainly at emotions. So interoception is linked to the physiological feedback from the body. And then Alexthymia now, which makes it more interesting again on this topic, is because we are talking of empathy and emotions. So Alexithymia refers to difficulties in recognizing and distinguishing between different emotions and bodily sensations. Difficulties in expressing emotions. A lack of imagination or fantasy life. And thoughts focused on external rather than internal experience. So Alexithymia is mainly linked to empathy, emotions. And that's why we hear people saying autistic people cannot show empathy. And this is where Alexithymia is coming in. It's more about emotions. Whereas interoception is more about the other physical expressions of the body. So here, Alexithymia is the product of developmental dysfunction or reduced connectivity between limbic structures, including the anterior insula and anterior cingulate cortex. The regions implicated in the subjective experience of emotion, affective recognition, and empathy. And you can see a highlight here, it's a developmental dysfunction which affects emotion, recognition, and empathy. So for a person to show empathy, Alexithymia is in play. And the next definition is saying that Alexithymia is a highly prevalent and plays an important role in autism spectrum disorder, with approximately half of autistic individuals estimated as having Alexithymia. But the nature of this role remains elusive. That's why this topic excites me. It indicates the lack of terms to express emotions and moods. So let's remember Alexithymia, let's talk about emotions, let's connect with recognition and empathy. Let's talk about expressing emotions and moods, which we say in course all the time, autistic people are not empathetic. So what's the prevalence of Alexithymia? Alexithymia prevalence is low at 10%, but it frequently co-occurs with autistic individuals at 50%. Meanwhile, Nicholson noted that approximately 50% of autistic individuals have clinically significant levels of Alexithymia. 50% of autistic individuals. And Kinnard, Stewart, and Cantura added that there is a prevalence rate of 55% in autistic adults. So you can see that 10% when it's not occurring with autistic individual, but it jumps to 50%. So there's a close connection between alexithymia and autism here. However, research is showing that alexithymia is thought to be heightened in autistic people, and it predicts difficulties in facial, vocal, and musical emotion recognition. And again, these things have got deep emotions. It could be facial, vocal. That's the connection between alexithymia and empathy, emotions. Whereas when you look at the interoception now, we are saying, here I'm defining now interoception, after discussing alexithymia, showing that it's linked to empathy. Let's look now on the other one. The visceral sensory system, known as interoception, has been emphasized as the biological basis of the interaction between body and mind. A bidirectional causality, which highlights the fundamental importance of the body in emotional phenomena. So, interoception describes the perception and integration of autonomic, hormonal, and homeostatic signals that collectively represent the physiological state of the body through the continuous dynamic feedback of afferent visceral signals to the brain. So when you know that you are thirst, when you feel that pain, your body is responding to the message it is getting through the visceral sensory system. And here, take note, I'm not talking of empathy. So, Pulsar, just 2020, recent research, noted that pervasive difficulties with awareness and integration of interoceptive signals may cause a lack of awareness of hunger, thirst, pain, and the need to make bowel or bladder movements. So, imagine someone who can't realize they're hungry, someone who can't realize their thirst, they can't feel the pain, and these are the difficulties which come with integration of interoceptive signals. Whereas alexithymia, I keep going back, we were talking of empathy, not hunger, not thirst, but empathy. But however, Pulsar et al. Statement is showing that interoception deficits are mainly associated with bodily physical demands, which is said at the above statement, than emotional or empathy expressions. But some research reported that autistic people experience persistent interoceptive abnormalities, especially hypersensitivities to internal cues, such as difficulty in detecting and recognize bodily sensation. That's what we have discussed on the slide. Lower body and thirst awareness. So, Hedrick 2021 current research explained further by stating that adopting the perspective of another person is an important aspect of social cognition and has been shown to depend on the multisensory signals from one's own body, and that interoceptive signals not only contribute to on-body perception and self-consciousness, but empathy. Now, this is where I'm asking people, following this discussion, listening, that here now, Heydrich is saying but to empathy. The earlier definitions were linking alexithymia to empathy. But here, Heydrich is extending it further to empathy. And I say, interestingly, Heydrich is including empathy as one depending on the interoceptive sensory signals from one's body. So there's a connection here. That is, interoception cannot be an entity on its own from Alexthymia. Let's check what others will say. Looking at feeling empathy when we're talking of Alexthymia, Fletcher, Watson, and Harper mentioned that understanding more about interoception in autism may be important for elucidating sensory sensitivities and experiences, as well as differences in the social domain. This topic is important, really. We need to understand this. As you are seeing, you're going to have conflict theories. That's why I said this is an exciting topic for me. And Fletcher and Harper again warned that if autistic people have problems, knowing what other people are thinking, but that does not mean they do not care how they feel. As there is a disassociation between the skills required to comprehend the mental state of other people and emotional empathy. So again here, we can clearly see that we mistake that autistic people do not show empathy. And straight away we think they do not feel. And research is saying that is wrong. Because some research has been done and some children have been shown, despite not showing, expressing the empathy, but they could feel it. And they could show that they were feeling it, but they could not show it. So feeling and expressing empathy. Feeling empathy must also be distinct from expressing empathy. That's what I was saying. And that expressing empathy may prove challenging for some autistic people. That's expressing, but feeling it, they do, which is crucial as well. It's very important as well. And that makes them different from psychopaths. Psychopaths are the opposite of autistics. They are good at telling what one thinks and may use that to manipulate the victim, but not care about their feelings. Autistic people will care about the feelings. And autism has been recognized as an autonomous pathological condition differentiated from schizophrenia. So interoception is the process of representing one's internal physiological states, whereas alexithymia is a condition characterized by difficulties in describing and identifying one's own emotions. And why are we talking of these two? Because they commonly co-occur with autism. So, is interoception a feature of autism? So, the impaired interoception inference will give rise to alexithymia, or an inability to recognize and define one's emotions. So here we are saying impaired interoceptive inference, right, will give rise to alexithymia. Can you get the connection here now? So impaired interoception gives rise to alexithymia. Okay, so are we saying if interoceptive connection is strong and good and working well, there's no rise to alexithymia? And we say again here, looking at this statement from Quattrocchi and Friston, which I'm looking at, and say that interoception may also scaffold the processing imperative for the emergence of cognitive empathy and a compassionate behavior, and may translate into an emotional state resembling anxiety. And I'm asking viewers now to look carefully at this definition by Quattropi and Friston in 2014. Can you see he's defining now a connection, one, impaired interoception, which leads to two, Alexthymia, which leads to three, deficits on empathy. So we see empathy because Alexthymia is in play there as a deficit, but Alexthymia is there as a deficit because interoception is impaired. And arguably, Quattropi and Friston are not supporting the view that it is Alexthymia rather than autism, which gives rise to impaired interoceptive, cognitive, empathy, and compassionate behavior. So when you say it's autism, which is causing cognitive empathy, that's not what Quattropi and Friston are saying here. It's not. But they're saying it's Alexthymia. Again, Alexthymia is behaving in that way because of impaired interoception. That's Quattropi and Friston. However, contrary to Quattropi and Friston, we've got some other research saying no, that impaired interoceptive inference would give rise to Alexthymia, right? A range of literature agrees with Du Bois here, who argued that at the interoceptive level, right, there is evidence that some autistic people may experience even fundamental states, such as hunger and pain, which has been said in other earlier research, which we discussed that interoceptive deficits may lead to hunger and pain, fine, differently from the general population. But here I highlight Alexthymia, not autism, has been linked to altered interoception, right? So again, there's an argument here that Alexthymia is there because there is altered interoception. It's not autism. That's what we want to clear there, that autism has got nothing to do with that at the early stage. What is in play is interoception, which is altered, which leads to Alexthymia. It's not autism. And some researchers again are refuting it and arguing that Alexthymia itself may cause anxiety. An inability to healthily express and externalize emotions could lead to a variety of psychosomatic manifestations, which may be manifested as immune, gastrointestinal, and circadian disruptions, all frequently seen in autism spectrum disorder. Yes, these are seen in autism spectrum disorder. But this research is saying Alexthymia itself may cause anxiety and the inability to healthily express and externalize emotions. So some are putting a strong emphasis, like here, to Alexthymia itself. While some researchers argue that abnormalities could lie at the heart of autism because of the critical role interoception plays in the ontogeny of the social affective process. And they argue that social affective and underlying interoceptive impairments are not a feature of autism per se, but Alexthymia. You can see more and more research is linking to Alexthymia. But again, earlier research said Alexthymia is there due to underlying challenges, problems in interoception. Impairments in interoception do not lie at the heart of either autism or Alexthymia. Can you see now where this is now coming from now? That Nicholson in 2018 and Shah in 2016 are coming with argument that impairments in interoception do not lie at the heart of either autism or alexithymia. And again, it links with argument of Quattropi in 2014 earlier, which says it's interception which leads to alexithymia, then autism. So, alexithymia, which is characterized by difficulties in recognizing emotions, as we said throughout this, is linked to atypical interception, which again is being said from different researchers, but more interestingly, is a completely independent construct with its own etiological and neurocognitive basis. That's saying, look, although alexithymia causes all these problems, it's a completely independent construct. And the relationship between alexithymia and interception and the lack of an association between interception and autism spectrum disorder suggests that previous findings of reduced interception ability in autism spectrum disorder are in fact a consequence of the greater proportion of alexithymic individuals in the autism spectrum disorder population. So here Shah is saying, look, because the autistic population has got a higher alexithymia in them, right? So if we look at the lack of an association between interception and autism spectrum disorder, that suggested that more autistic people on this research had alexithymia. And remember, earlier we said 50% of autistic people, the prevalence, they have got alexithymia challenges. And further to this argument, Brewer is suggesting that it is alexithymia rather than autism, most accurately characterized as a general failure of interception. Now here he's saying it is alexithymia, but it's there because interception is a failure, which again links with other research that starts with deficits in interception, which leads to alexithymia, then autism, not autism per se. So emotional processing impairments in autism spectrum disorder may be due to co-occurring alexithymia, raising the possibility that emotional signals are not perceived and thus not integrated into decision making in those with alexithymia, and that therefore reduced forming effects in autism are a product of co-occurring alexithymia rather than autism spectrum disorder per se. This is being said over and over by different researchers that it has got nothing to do with autism on its own. And Brewer compares with Shah that alexithymia is not purely associated with deficits relating to the identification of one's emotion, purely associated, but instead with interoception failure more generally. There you go again. So we got interoceptive failure there, which results to alexithymia. But alexithymia on its own will not give rise to deficits of one's emotions, but it will do so if there are challenges and deficits in interoception. So autistic individuals are more likely to suffer interoceptive impairment due to an elevated risk of alexithymia. There you go again. You have higher alexithymia, which means you are going to have interoceptive impairment. Whereas earlier, it would look like you have a deficit in interoception, then you have issues with alexithymia. But here, elevated risk of alexithymia means they are more likely to suffer from interoceptive impairment, which again will cause, the physical needs of the body, as interoceptive, as you said, the physiological part of it, including emotion as well. And I did put a quotation to help listeners to call back what Quattropi and Tristan said earlier, that the impaired interoceptive inference would give rise to alexithymia, meaning interoception and alexithymia are bidirectional. But there's no autism there in the first place. It's those two, interoception and alexithymia. So Spear added to this view, stating that many of the psychosocial difficulties associated with autism, such as empathic responses, emotional recognition, eye fixation difficulties, all these things are associated with autism, are not a characteristics of autism itself. This is the message, but rather a characteristic of co-occurring alexithymia. So we correct alexithymia, then some of these co-occurring conditions will disappear on autistic people. So this suggests that alexithymia, is more powerful predictor of empathy abilities than autistic traits. There you go again. It's all to do with alexithymia, which is more powerful predictor of empathy abilities than autistic traits itself. And it's consistent with the theory that socio-emotional difficulties classically associated with autism spectrum conditions may be explained by co-occurring alexithymia. So autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia are independent constructs. And alexithymia is not required for a diagnosis of autism. No, it is present in all autistic individuals. We said 50% of autistic people, there's presence of alexithymia, but it's not present in all of them, and it's not required for diagnosis of autism. Hence, it's on 50% of autistic people. And Shah added that many non-autistic individuals, that 10%, have elevated degrees of alexithymia and no autism spectrum disorder. And Nicholson concluded that early interoception difficulties are resolved or compensated for by adulthood in autistic people, meaning that we need more research to understand more alexithymia, especially on children, young people, before they get in adulthood. Because once they get in adulthood, we are going to miss it. Because they've lived with it longer, they can camouflage, they can mask it, they can live with it. So different outcomes of autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia are theoretically supported by claims that cognitive and affective networks in the social brain diverge, implying that processes involved in cognitive perspective taking and in emotional interoception and empathy are likely embedded, but with differentially distributed and interconnected networks. So in conclusion, this literature review, which I've just done, shows that some of the difficulties in socio-emotional processing thought to be characteristics of autism spectrum conditions may instead be due to co-occurring alexithymia. In line with current research, alexithymia, not autism spectrum disorder, is predictive of problems with emotion processing. Emotional processing difficulties traditionally associated with autism spectrum disorder are in fact rooted in co-occurring alexithymia rather than representing a core feature of autism spectrum disorder itself. And a close examination of the literature is showing that, where observed, emotional impairments are due to alexithymia, a condition that frequently occurs with autism, rather than a feature of autism per se. And in this view, if it is found that autistic individuals, but without alexithymia, exhibit no emotional impairments, then emotional impairments should no longer be considered diagnostic markers. And critical analysis is also required when interpreting the results of all studies of autism using emotional and non-emotional stimuli, such as theory of mind. We really need to have critical analysis on that. The American Psychiatric Association may need to revise its diagnosis for autism. That is, if it's found that alexithymia plays a role, because currently it's not affecting the diagnosis. It's not on the diagnosis list from the American Psychiatric Association, but if it does, then we have to revise the diagnosis of autism. So thank you very much. It has been a long presentation, but very interesting, and you can see the argument. Some of you would like to read. I've put these documents, which I've presented today, here on my ResearchGate. You can also download it and read it. I put the whole document there for you to see. And at the same time, I would encourage you to keep watching my YouTube channel for more updates. You need to subscribe so that when I make my next presentation, you are able to see that I've added up some more discussions. Thank you very much for following this channel, Autism Discourse. Thank you. Bye.